Hello, my dear students. Welcome to another objective series session under the RBI Grade B Mentorship Program for 2024 by Clarity for Sure courses. So this is the 14th number objective series session. So here we are going to deal with another relevant topic, that is banking system in India in relation with in the light of RBI guidelines that has been recently published in the newspaper. So what was the guideline? 2 days before, I mean Friday last week only, the RBI has published some circulars regarding those small finance banks which are willing to convert into the universal banks. All right. So it is regarding the criteria. It is setting up the criteria for those small finance banks which are willing to get the license for the universal banks. So through these questions, before going to practice these questions, let's see the concept behind the small finance banks and finance banks. What is the concept behind it? So in 2021 only, RBI received lots of application under the guidelines. See the guidelines. The RBI has issued one guideline, that one tap licensing. All right, of universal banks and small finance banks. So since this term had appeared in the RBI guideline, so what is this one type licensing? It means the window for obtaining a bank license. It is just a window. It is a one-stop solution for obtaining the bank licenses from the RBI, which is open throughout the year. All right. In under the one type licensing, you can have a license for the from the RBI for universal bank as well as for small finance banks, and it is open throughout the year, or that the RBI will accept the application and issue licenses to banks at all times throughout the year. All right. So I have described the term one time licensing. Now let's understand about the small finance banks. What are the functions? Why the small finance banks were opened? What are the prime objective? And who are eligible to set up the small finance bank? So as the name denotes, small finance banks. So they would be primarily engaged in the business related with small finances. All right. So it is established to provide banking services, basic banking services to those who were unserved. All right. Or those who were in the unorganized sector, like or the small business owners, micro and small industries, the farmers, where the banks, the proper banking system has not been channelized. The small finance banks actually facilitates the banking services to those unserved, unserved or underserved population. All right. So this is the prime function of small finance banks. Means you can have this point in your financial inclusion also. It promotes what? Financial inclusion. See some of the examples like Capital Small Finance Banks, Ujjivan, Utkarsh, AU Small Finance Banks. You might have appeared in the news recently that AU Small Finance Banks got the RBI note to merge with FinCare Small Finance Banks. And this merger will be effective from 1st of April 2024 only. All right. So on tomorrow only, the merger from tomorrow only, this merger will get effective. All right. AU Small Finance is going to be merged with FinCare, and it could be possible. It could be possible that AU Small Finance Bank would be the first one to get the license under the universal banks. All right. It could be possible for the AU Small Finance Bank to get the license for universal banking. So small finance bank, they also need to maintain the minimum cash reserve ratio as well as liquidity ratios as applicable to them. All right. And the minimum paid up voting equity capital, the minimum paid up voting equity capital shall be 200 crore. All right. It shall be 200 crore for the small finance banks. And who are eligible to set up the small finance banks? all the residents of India, Indian citizens or the professionals singly, means uh, one-to-one basis or in jointly, they can set up the small finance bank having the experience of not less than 10 years in banking and financial services. All right, at senior level, they should have the minimum experience of 10 years. And those companies and the societies in private sector owned and controlled by the residents of India, they can also set up the small finance bank which have a successful track record of minimum 5 years. All right, in performing the business services or financial services. So this is the first eligibility who is going regarding who is eligible to set up the small finance bank. The second one is all the existing non-banking financial companies. All right. For the microfinance institution, local area banks in the private sectors, they can also set up the small finance bank with a minimum successful track record of running their businesses for at least 5 years. For at least 5 years, along with they have to comply with the other legal and regulatory requirements issued by the RBI. All right. So the, these were the second type. These were the second grouping that can be eligible to establish the small finance banks. In the third point, we can say that the existing payments banks, they can also set up the small finance banks. Those were controlled by the residents of the country only and have completed minimum 5 years of successful operation of their businesses, means in payment banking businesses. All right, successful operation along with some other requirements set up by the RBI guidelines. So let's see that who are not permitted to set up what small finance banks. So the joint ventures by different promoter groups, they are not permitted to set up small finance banks. They are strictly being like they are not permitted to set up small finance banks. According to the RBI, if a small finance banks aspire to transit into a universal bank, if they aspire to get the license for the universal bank, they should have a satisfactory track record of performance for minimum how many years? 5 years. All right. So remember this point. They should have a minimum, a good track record in functioning of their businesses for minimum 5 years before getting the license for the universal bank. So why they are willing to get converted into the universal bank? What's the need to get the license of universal? So there must be some positive points associated with the universal banks. So let's understand briefly about the universal bank. These are the they provide comprehensive banking system services in India. All right. Some of the services being provided by the universal banks are like commercial banking services. Those services which are similar to the traditional commercial banks, like accepting deposits, offering like uh, account saving, current account services, extending loans, credit facilities. All right, facilitating trade financings and international transactions. These were some basic commercial banking services provided by the universal bank. However, they also provide investment banking services. All right, investment banking services like providing investment advisory and portfolio management services. Okay, they also provide the underwriting securities and facilitating the capital market transactions. We have discussed everything about the universal banks, about the small finance banks in our classes, in our live classes conducted by the C4S courses. You can visit our portal in order to get the access for these beneficial classes. All right. Let's see the third important services that they are going to provide. All the financial services like asset management services, the loans for the auto products, insurance product services, deposits, financial analysis, the factoring services, detailed discussion you can see in the portal only, housing finance services, retail loans. So these are the services provided by the universal banks. All right. So, do you know which is the first financial institutions, first financial institutions in India that adopted the universal banking services? The first financial institution in India adopted the universal banking services. It is ICICI. All right. So remember this point. This is the first financial institution services that has got the license for universal banking in India. Okay. And the first, probably the first small finance banking that will get the node for universal banking license would be AU Small Finance Banks. Okay. It may get license under the universal banking services. So, uh, one thing it is, you need to remember that not all the commercial banks are universal banks. If they statement, if in a multiple choice questions it will came that all commercial banks are universal, then it would be wrong. All commercial banks are not universal banks. Okay. And universal banks obviously provide wide range of services to their clients. So let's move on to the session now. Let's see some of the questions that may came in your examination. The circular issued by the RBI. I have already provided this question yesterday only on our Telegram channel. On our Telegram channel, you can join our Telegram channel and you can subscribe us also in order to get these daily basis objective series session as well as subjective series session questions. All right. So let's see the question over here. The circular issued by the RBI exercising authority under which section? Under section 22 of the Banking Regulation Act. So remember this section also. Under section 22 outlines the commencement and applicability of the transition provision All right, it is related to transition provision. It applies uniformly to all the small financial banks. Small finance banks. Through this only, RBI recently set a eligibility criteria for the small finance banks willing to upgrade themselves into the universal banks. I have already discussed about it. So, from where the RBI is getting the power for regarding these type of provisions under section 22 of the BR Act 1949. All right. So after the merger of AU Small Finance Bank with the FinCare Small Finance Bank, which will be effective from tomorrow, means from 1st of April 2024, there are now 11 small finance banks existing in the country. Okay, after the merger, there will be 11 small finance banks. Means before the merger, 12 small finance banks are there in the India, but from 1st of April, it will be 11. Merely one is currently eligible to seek the universal banking license. That one is what? AU Small Finance Banks. They are fulfilling the criteria. So, I have framed some questions, some relevant questions regarding the criteria of the small finance banks that are willing to convert to the willing to get the license under the universal banks. So let's see the first question. Small finance banks currently need a minimum need to maintain a minimum 15% of capital adequacy ratio. They need to maintain a minimum 15% of capital adequacy ratio after the transition to the universal bank. On transition to the how much capital adequacy ratio these small finance banks after getting the license of universal banks need to maintain? How much percentage? So the correct answer is over here is 11.5%. 11.5%. All right. From 15%, it is reduced. It will be reduced to 11.5%. So of capital adequacy ratio. Let's see. Question number 2. Small finance banks had to allocate 75% of their total net credit to the priority sector lending on. 75% to whom? To the PSL, for the PSL lending. Small finance bank, because their primary objective is what? Their primary objective is to serve the unserved population as well as underserved population, those who are not getting the like formal banking services. So obviously they will allocate most of their credit to the priority sector lending as per the RBI guideline. Whereas the universal bank, if a small finance bank will get the nod for the universal bank, then it will be also reduced. This 75% for PSL will also reduce to how many percent? Right now, universal bank uh, has to invest like how many percentage in the priority sector lending. The correct answer is 40%. Universal bank have the lower priority sector lending of 40%. All right. Let's see the another question. Question number third. It is about small finance banks mandate to have at least 50% of the loan portfolio in loans less than 25 lakh no longer applies to the universal banks. They need to maintain this much, but after the conversion, it will no longer applies to those small finance banks that get the license of for universal banks. This criteria that they need to maintain 50% of the loan portfolio. Small finance banks must complete a minimum how many years of successful operation? I have already discussed 5 years of successful operation to get the in order to get the upgradation for universal banks. Okay, 5 years of successful operation along with they need to fulfill the criteria defined under the RBI guidelines. All right, legal criteria, legal. Uh, so let's see the question number 4. According to the guidelines issued by the RBI on Friday last week only, the small finance banks meeting the following conditions can seek for converting to the universal banks, having a minimum net worth of how much? Having a minimum net worth of, just remember this point is very important point, very important point. All right, they small finance banks have to maintain the how much? 200 crore. But if they are willing to convert into the universal bank, they need to maintain a minimum net worth of 1000 crore. 1000 crore. Okay. They should have a minimum net worth of 1000 crore in order to get the licenses for the universal banks. Let's see the question number 5 about the NPS, the gross and the net NPS. In order to seek the universal bank licenses, small finance banks required to maintain its gross NPA at less than how many percentage and the net NPA less than how many percentage. For the last 2 fiscal years, it is 3%, they 3% and 1%. Okay, gross NPA should be less than 3% and net NPA should be less than 1% in the last 2 financial years. All right, before getting the license for universal banks. And let's see the question number 6, the last question of this series. The following conditions, it is clearly mentioned in the RBI guideline. I have taken the question from there only. All the questions were mentioned in the RBI guideline. Okay. The following conditions shall be applicable with regard to shareholding pattern. Shareholding pattern for the first option is there. There is no mandatory requirement for an eligible small finance banks to have a identified promoter. No requirement to have a identified promoter. However, the existing promoters, okay, of the eligible small finance bank, if any, if there is any existing promoters, they shall continue to be as a promoter, even if after the transition to universal banks. There is for those small finance banks converting to the there is first of all there is no need to have a promoter and if there is any existing promoter for already running a small finance bank, they can carry on as a promoter in here also. They can continue as promoter after the transition as well. Second point, so this is the correct statement. addition to new promoters or change in promoters shall not be permitted. See the term, not be permitted for an eligible small finance bank while transition to universal banks. Means new promoters add or the changing of the change in promoters, it will not be permitted. These are not allowed. So this statement is also correct, that RBI has strictly like put the strict regulation that there should be no new promoters. Third number, there shall be no new mandatory lock-in requirements for minimum shareholding for existing promoters in the transition universal banks. No new mandatory lock-in requirements. Okay, this point is also correct. There shall be no change to the promoter shareholding dilution plan already approved by the RBI. Okay, this point is also correct. The eligible small finance banks having diversified loan portfolio will be preferred. The eligible small finance banks, they will be preferred. All right. So by this, all the all the statement will be correct. Those small finance banks which are listed only, they are one more point I would like to add. Those small finance banks which are listed will qualify for this, or will qualify for this conversion. Okay. So remember, those small finance banks which will be listed. So that's all for today's session. Thank you very much. I hope you are getting benefit from these objective series session as well as subjective series sessions. So we will keep these sessions uh, till your examination will come. All right. So be connected with us. Thank you. Thank you very much.